Alright, in this video, let's take a look at the very basics of creating animated line drawings using SVGs in Framer Motion and React. The code example for this video is a very simple animation of this X, and I'm keeping it simple intentionally so that we can just talk about some of the core concepts used for creating these kind of line drawings. And of course, you can take these core concepts and create whatever you want with them. But let's take a look at our component here, which I've called line drawing. And it basically has an SVG element, and inside of it has two line elements. And we're importing motion from Framer Motion and prepending these SVG and line elements with the motion dot, which turns them into animatable SVG elements. What that really means is that we can use all those nice Framer Motion props like initial and animate and variance and custom to tailor our animations. So just going over the basics of the SVG elements themselves, the SVG has a width and a height of 600 pixels, and we're also setting the viewbox coordinate system here for these lines to work inside of. And for each of these line elements, we're defining the X and the Y points, which place these lines inside of the viewbox, and that's what's giving us these angled lines creating the X. But the part that we're really interested in, that we're focusing on for this video, is how the animation works. So let's check out the motion SVG first, and notice here that we've got the initial and the animate props, which are Framer Motion props for setting the initial and final states of the animation. Now with basic usage of Framer Motion, you might see initial and animate actually be assigned to objects. So let's say you wanted to do an opacity fade in. You could assign initial an object and start with an opacity of 0, and then have your animate prop and animate the opacity up to 1 for a fade in. But in this case, we're doing something a little bit different because we're using variance here, and we're going to talk about variance in a second. But as you can see, we're now assigning initial and animate to strings or labels, and these represent different states of the animation. And these animation states, hidden and visible, they live inside of this variance object called draw, and you can see those labels right here, hidden and visible. And this variance object, this is being referenced by the child line elements by using the variance prop on them. You see we have variance equals draw and variance equals draw for both of these line elements. So variants are used for a couple reasons. One of them is to kind of keep the code more maintainable and cleaner, because you can extract the different animatable properties outside of the basic component. But the other aspect of using variants is that they allow you to create kind of orchestrations between different elements. So in this case, the SVG element itself is sort of playing the role of a director, and it's defining what the initial and animate states are going to be, that is, hidden and visible. And then the individual line elements inside are going to refer to those states inside of the draw variance object because we've assigned it to that object using the variance prop. So when the component is mounted, the SVG element is going to kick off the initial state, which is referring to the hidden label. And that hidden label is assigned to an object in which we're using the special pathLength property and initializing it to 0. And when we animate to the visible state, which is here, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, but I just want you to see that pathLength is getting animated to 1. So we're going from 0 to 1, and that's what's creating this effect of the lines being drawn. So it's a little bit like animating the width of an element from 0 to 100%, let's say, but because we're in SVG land, we're using the pathLength property. And this is going to be a value anywhere from 0 to 1. With 1 representing the true actual length of the line. So let's focus now on what's going on with the visible state, because we have something special here. Instead of just setting visible to a normal object, we're setting it to a dynamic function, which kind of does some stuff, which we'll talk about in a second, and then returns an object. Now the stuff that it's doing is setting a different delay time for each of those pathLength animations. And the way it's doing that is through this special custom prop, which you can see on each of these motion lines. So the first one I've set to 0.3, or 300 milliseconds, and the second one I've set to 0.6, 600 milliseconds. And the value that's passed in here to the custom prop, it comes in as what we're calling I here, And we're assigning those custom values to a variable that we're calling delay. And delay is being used here, specifically for the delay of the transition for the pathLength animation. And that's why we see each of these lines animating in succession. And these values of 300 milliseconds and 600 milliseconds, they're just arbitrary. So you can set them to taste. Like for example, we could have the first one be, let's say 1, and the second one come in a little bit later at 2, or 2 seconds, and then it looks like this. So those are really just up to you. And other than that, we're kind of customizing the type of the transition to have more of a spring kind of easing to it, which makes it a little bit less mechanical and less boring than the normal linear ease. If you're interested in learning how to bring your web pages to life with cool animations, GSAP, and scrollytelling techniques, check out my course, Scrollytelling 101. Since I launched the course, the response has been amazing, with students commenting on the wealth of web dev tips and tricks included in the lessons. I'm going to leave a link down below for you, and you can start by checking out some of the free preview videos there. I think you're going to love it.